Real experts are more interested with their usability of their knowledge rather than acquiring more knowledge. So what you see in society is like people just going to school, back to university, back to university, back to university, back to university, right? Because they just don't know what to do. And it's like, I'm becoming an expert because I'm acquiring 3 degrees in this, and this. And yet what really an expert is defined by is having one qualification, but then spending the rest of their life figuring out how to communicate what that one qualification means. So by the end of their life, 20% of their time has been spent getting the qualification or getting the skill, but 80% of their life has been spent figuring out how to communicate the skill so that it can actually be used. And if you look around what's happening, that's really true of society, that people are acquiring more and more skills. I don't see a shortage of people with degrees and with skills and with something to offer the world, but I do see a shortage of people who cannot communicate what that skill means to the person that they're speaking to, whether that be an employer. Like they should, after you finish a degree, spend a year with you going, all right, we've just taught you all of this stuff. Now let's spend a year with you actually teaching you how to communicate with somebody so that you can actually use it and you'll get some value out of the 30 grand you just probably invested in getting a degree these days. Very rarely to do with money, it's very rarely to do with the time that's available to them. It's nearly always that I thought you were going to do this, or I thought physiotherapy was this, and you've just spoke to me about something else completely different. And it could be that you spoke more about pain, you spoke more about we'll help a foot problem, and they're thinking, why do you want to play golf? So their disconnect there is actually the reason that they wouldn't go ahead 8 out of 10 times. The problem, how many years are you out of school now? Just graduated. So the problem of coming out of school into private practice is you get taught medically, you get taught to speak about the bones and the foot and the muscles and the ligaments and dorsiflexion and, is it plantar flexion? I forgot these days. You get taught to speak about all of these things that to the patient it's like, what the hell is that? I don't want dorsiflexion, I just want my foot to move. It's like, it's one of them, you know. I don't want my VAS score down, I just want to be out of pain. I just want to be able to walk further. So it's always back to basics, and that's what all I'll ever try and do in these, when I'm back, is just help you come back to basics. Because I'm never going to teach anything new. I haven't gone off and learned a whole load of new things over the last however many years of doing this thing. What I found more and more of working with businesses, and doing this now all over the world, is the actual biggest problem is they forget the basics. They forget to do what they're already told to do. So with you, it's nice to be able to do it with you for the first time. I'll get as many sessions as I can over the next few weeks when I'm back. But for you who've been around for a long time, it's often just a reminder of back to basics. That you'll find your communication just goes off on a tangent. You say one thing one day and you get away with it, and then all of a sudden 6 weeks later, what you used to say is completely different from the thing that you were taught to do. And you find that because of the numbers kind of correct you when you're looking at things like your orthotics or your conversions from discovery, and you almost can reset yourself when you see that the orthotics are not getting sold, or well, why did we sell 6 pair of orthotics in February and none in August? Something's not being said right by somebody in the chain, whether it's from the very first phone call, from the discovery visit, from the sessions, to the outcome that they've been promised. It's often that even as a physio, the questions will elicit better answers if they just come for pain relief and they just come for getting their foot moving again, versus tell me more about golf. If you've spent 6 sessions connecting with somebody about golf, or you've spent 6 sessions connecting with a hiker who wants to be in the woods, up in Gisborne somewhere, that person is significantly more likely to want to buy the product that will support that outcome, because it's been relevant to them all the way through the sessions. Does that make sense? Whereas if we just talk about their treatment and getting ultrasound or massage or whatever it will be, they'll never ever take the next step, and they're very unlikely then. The biggest issue, and you can always see when you get good word of mouth referrals, is that you've really made a good connection. Now I do sound like Love Island. You've made a good connection with them based upon the thing that they want to do over and above. And that's my experience, is they rarely recommend you because of physiotherapy. They'll recommend you because of the outcome that you achieved for them that was relevant to them. And that's what they want the other person to experience as well. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if it's just about the physiotherapy and just about we did good in terms of treatment and you did good in terms of massage, or even we did good in terms of customer service, they very rarely actually recommend the product like we want them to, but they'll recommend the feeling that they've got as a result of the product, which is physiotherapy, because they want that other person to experience that. That makes sense? So when a patient comes in, it's hard, and it's like when you get people walking in at Gisborough, I've no doubt the first thing is like, tell me what your price is, or how much do you charge, or how does this work, or do you have some information? That's always the best one. Do you have some information on physio? Well, what information do you want? Like, how can we help? It's hard because they want to talk logically to you. They want to talk about the product. And very quickly, we've got to get them off to talking about what life looks like after the product. It's almost the product is irrelevant. Or the service in our case is completely irrelevant. They just don't know how to ask anything else. I'd love them to walk in and say, hey, can you help me get to the top of these mountains every weekend, and get out with my friends and get some fresh air and keep my heart and lungs healthy and stop me from getting diseases and keep my joints moving in my 60s, 70s and 80s. But they're not going to ever do that because most people can't communicate that's what they want. So the real skill of the front desk person, the physio, your job should be easy. If she does her job right, or we do the front desk, we do the front desk right. That's why I say it's always the most important. If we do that right, it sets it up for that to be easier, because he just continues the conversation that you started. The problem will always be that they want to talk about the treatment to start with, and something has to go off in your brain and go like, let's just switch this conversation as fast as possible. They just don't know what else to ask. I've said it many times on trainings I've done. It's like the guy goes up to the girl in a bar, and what's the first thing he asks? Do you come here often? Does he want to know? Do you think he wants to know if she comes here often? Like, he does not want to know if you come here often. He wants to know a hell of a lot more than do you come here often. He just doesn't know where to start the conversation. And what happens if he asks, do you come here often? She says no. Oh yes. And it's like, well, where do you go from? Where do you go from there? And this is awkward, and now there's uncomfortable silences, and this isn't gone very far, and it's like, oh shit, this girl doesn't like me. It's like, well, no, you just didn't know how to ask her the right questions. And it's kind of pretty true of patients. They just don't know how to ask the right questions. So our job is always to ask or answer the questions that they should have asked, so that it opens up a conversation about the thing that they ultimately want, not the thing that we do. Does that make sense? So it's always the communication, and that's a lesson, reminders to us all that ultimately at the heart of good customer service, at the heart of getting somebody to do the thing that we need them to do to get the outcome that they want, is questions, always, talking less, listening more, and having them tell you beyond the ankle problem, the knee problem, the back problem, what it is ultimately that they want. And a failure to do that is ultimately what you see on this board. So that's how we make, that's how it becomes relevant. One way or another, it's all dressed up under communication, back to the start of this expectations. That if my expectation wasn't my expectation of physiotherapy is a certain thing before I call you, and then I speak to Becky, or I walk in and I speak to Emily in Gisborough, if she communicates with me in a way that isn't congruent with what my current expectation is, and she doesn't take the time to help me change that expectation or see that expectation differently over a 15-20 minute phone call, you'll see the arrival rate drop off. Yeah? Because the arrival rate is dependent upon Emily, because if I call you and I make a decision to come to the clinic, my arriving is predicated on what happened on that call, nothing else. Now there'll be anomalies, there'll be random illnesses and car crashes and so on, but if you see that become a car crash in and of itself, that it plummets to 80%, it's obvious that somebody isn't doing a good job with communicating or matching up the expectation for what the patient wanted versus what we think we're offering. So all of the questions back to tell me again, what are you looking for? How can we help? How long have you suffered? What do you really want to achieve? Have you had physiotherapy before? Massive questions. Somebody walks into Gisborne and says, hey, tell me about, give me some information. Absolutely. Just before we tell you what we do, have you had physio before? Because if I don't know what your experience is of my thing, I'm going down like a horrible rabbit hole of potentially explaining something to you that is the complete opposite of what you walked in here thinking physiotherapy was. And if I don't ask you that question, I'm assuming that you know all about exercises and whether we do hands-on treatment and whatever else. It may be that the person who walks into Gisborne has come from a bad experience in a hospital and walks through and says, give me some information, and you start saying, well, the price is this in half an hour sessions and we can get you in on a night and we're open on a weekend and we're all qualified and so on. That's usually the information at the surface level that if we're not careful we give out, when really what they're looking for is, how are you different to the NHS option? How are you different from the physio around the corner who didn't solve the problem that I've got? So one of the best places to start is always, and it's the best questions are always the simplest. As soon as they start to ask you, can I have some information? Yeah, of course, I'm more than happy to give you some information. Do you want to start by telling me what you're looking for? What's your understanding of physiotherapy? And you let them sell you on what they want. And instead of you being under pressure, which you can feel like that in Gisborne because they open that door and they're straight on top of you and it's like, holy shit, like they're asking you all these questions. The goal is to put them on the back foot instantly so that like you're almost able to come forward rather than the psychological feeling of like, shit, this person's staring at me and they're staring down at you. I'd even be inclined to stand up. If I was sat on that desk in Gisborne, it's not so bad here because you get a little bit more time. Gisborne feels horribly tight and close for them to be staring at you, where you can feel as though you don't have much power or much control in that conversation. First thing I'd do, I think, if I was over there, I'd just stand up and I'd just get eye contact with them straight away and just say, hey, absolutely, more than happy to give you any information. Best thing to do is start by telling me if you've had physio before, what's your current understanding of it, and let them talk. And then the quicker you can get to the question of what are you looking for and what do you want, so if you watch, this will sound stupid, but again, back to to the dating thing, right, back to Love Island, that's one of the questions that they're like, so what are you looking for? Like, it's a great question to ask, and the minute you transfer that over to the person, they're about to tell you what you need to do next. What are you looking for? I'm looking for somebody who'll do this, 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 and this, and your job just becomes, that's what we do. What else do you want? This, 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 and this. Well, we do that as well. And what else do you want? This, 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 and this. And the less that you can talk and replace selling, if you like, the service, or even selling Johnny or Jordan, the easier it is for them to say yes and feel comfortable and ultimately feel like at the end of that conversation that you're selling them what they need. And why wouldn't you? Because they're telling you what they need. And that's again a huge lesson I've learned over the last couple of years of watching people do this, that it's so tempting when they ask you questions to spend 5, 6, 7 minutes explaining your service and explaining your product, and the really easiest thing to do is just to switch it. Of course, I'll tell you everything you need to know so that before you leave this room today, you'll have all the information that you need, because that's what you've asked for. In order for me to give you the best information, do you want to tell me a little bit about what you're looking for? Great. And what's your current understanding of physio? Have you had it before? No, I've never had it in the past. All right, so this is the first time you've ever even considered physio? Yes, it is. Look, it might be that the best place for you to start, if you want this, is with a free discovery visit or a free taster session. Whereas if somebody comes in and says, tell me about physiotherapy, or tell me what you know about physio, they'll say, oh, my best friend's been coming here for 2 years. My best friend Alan's been coming here for 2 years. Or 5 years. He raves about the place. Every time I go for a beer with him, he tells me all about you. I know exactly about Johnny, I know about Jordan, I know about Danny. I've watched your Facebook videos, seems like a great place. I know everything from this guy. In fact, I'm sick of hearing about you. If that guy comes into your clinic, it's like, let's get going. Because he's in a completely different place than the person who walks in the street, who was coming onto Gisborne's High Street for some flowers and then decides to nip next door and ask if you've got any information on physio. So that's the skill, and it's the same for you as physios, is to try and understand where these people are. That if there was one thing I could say I've learned over the years now doing it would be that if you can figure out where they've come from and where their current place is on that journey, your ability to get them to buy into you from the get-go is huge, because you can speak to them very, very differently. You can offer them a product, i.e. taste a session or a full session. You're more confident in saying you need a plan of care rather than 2 or 3, let's get started. If I'm skeptical as shit in that treatment room, don't push me all the way. Don't start talking to me about orthotics. But you'll only get that by questioning me based upon where I've come from. Make sense? So you'll see that in the arrival rate. And what even if they show up and if we haven't done that right, he'll feel it or she'll feel it or he'll feel it with somebody who shows up in an evaluation, doesn't quite feel. When you get them, they're just still a little hard and they haven't been broken down and they're still a little bit cold. That's how, again, you'll feel that they haven't been educated, if you like, or allowed to almost talk themselves into a session. And that's pretty profound if you understand what that means. If you let them talk, right, if you, again, go back to relationships, what's the worst date, right? When you go out on a date with somebody, what's the worst scenario? What's the worst, what would define a crappy date?
Just sat there and talking.
Talking about themselves is really, right? So if I go out on a date, I'd never get a second one if I just sit there and go, I do this, 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 this and this. But if I just sit there with a bottle of wine and go, tell me more, that sounds good, tell me more, and more. The girl literally talks her way in to your life, or the other way. You've listened your way into their life. Because for the first time, somebody is listening. The next day, that girl would wake up and think, I really like that guy, he's very interesting. And it's like, well, I actually said jack shit. Like, I didn't say anything. Like, all I did was actually just listen and show an interest in your life. And anything that I did say thereafter, the reason that we would connect was because I listened to what you wanted, I listened to what was important to you, and therefore any conversation that I had with you was probably about what you wanted to talk about. Because I took the time to listen to what your interests were, what you're looking for, what's important to you. I was able to match up my conversations with those 3 to 5 things. And that entire conversation would feel pretty fluid to you, it would feel very comfortable to the gal. But if I'm talking about all my life, I think this is interesting, she's like, well, when do I get a chance to tell you about me? Because really that's what we all want. And it's no different in here. The more time that you can spend speaking to them about them and what they ultimately want, the better chance it gives you to talk to them about what they want. And your conversation is just something that you almost get in the middle of theirs. You don't have to bring it up, you don't have to make it up, you don't have to start going, oh shit, the prices of this, we're open at this point, and if you want weekends, like, they don't care about all of that shit till the end. What we must do for the first 10, 15, 20 minutes is get them to the point of this guy's interesting, this girl's interesting, the date scenario where it's like, I want another date. At that point, then you can start to give them all the logistics and the information, the leaflets. What's the classic when you go into a shop? Do you have any information? They pull out an A5 leaflet that somebody produced 7 years ago with an outdated price on it. They get the pen out. They start scribbling the fucking prices out. Oh, sorry, that phone number doesn't work anymore. And it's like, there you go. There's your information. And it tells you what the cost is. It tells you when the shop's open or what the 2-for-1 on the happy hour is or whatever it will be, except Fridays now, That's not information. That's not what they want. That's the logistics that would seal it. My view on it all is, if you do that conversation right, it makes that piece of paper irrelevant. If you do that conversation right, it makes the price irrelevant. If you do that conversation right, it makes whether you're open on a Saturday or a Monday irrelevant, because they'll come. If I like that, that date's gone really well. When can we have a next one? Well, I'm only available on a Thursday. I'm there. Whereas if it's like, I'm not quite sure about the date, it's like, well, can you do next Friday? No, oh, I'm busy. All right, well, I'll get back to you and we'll see how it goes. But you'd move heaven and earth if the first conversation goes well, yes or no, with everything in life. So you can conclude from that it really isn't the money, it isn't the time, it isn't you're only open on a Sunday, or you're only open at this time and I'm not available. It's that you didn't make a deep enough connection with me on that first phone call, in that first session, that made me want to see past any other option that I might have on Thursday or any of the commitment that I've got on Thursday to come and see you. And again, none of this is earth-shattering, none of this is, you know, tactical, how to say this or how to say that, but it's the basics that often get overlooked, because in the heat of the moment, when somebody does open the door, when that phone does ring, and they belt down the phone with, what's the price, how does it work, and you're like, oh shit, well it works like this, and you get so logical and so tactical very, very quickly. Something has to kick in to go, tell me more about you. What are you looking for? In order for me to give you the best, if you want information, in order for me to give you the best information, I need to know a little bit about what you need, and set off on a journey. And you'll see from that, if you like, and that's where I'm going with this, the foundation of that, that is the foundation of all of this. That at the other end, you can tell what happened. You can tell what happened at the start based upon how many orthotics were sold, how many upsells were made, what the arrival rate was like, what the patient visit average has been, what the customer service score is, all from the front end.